got everybody spread out. That's all right. It is swarm season. Yay. Raise your hand if you've collected a swarm.
How many?
Okay, how many?
How many? Let's see. From my 2 long Langsforths, we've had 7.
7. So those are coming from your own,
From my
ones
own.
that you're collecting from your own.
Yeah, and then Scott, who used to be here, he came and helped me with all of them, and so he's ended up with a lot of extra.
I think Scott said something about 9 or something like that he has collected
he got
so far.
2 from his own hive.
So Scott gets taken off of the swarm list because he's got too many. I've been turning them down when they come across there. I've been turning them down saying, somebody else go get it. Or it just happens to be like on Wednesday evening right before I got to be here for church, or Sunday evening right before I got to be here. It's just like, well, somebody else will enjoy that swarm. But I have a pretty good feeling that tomorrow, if this rain will clear up, tomorrow's got probably a pretty good chance of being a heavy swarm day. It almost always happens right after a rain, and because they are just sitting in there just waiting to go. And as soon as they get a nice day, I saw some on Facebook today that there were some taken off today, even with it raining. So tomorrow could be a good day for swarms. So I wish they would find one of my swarm traps. That would help make it a whole lot easier. But they don't tend to decide whether they want to make it easy on me or not. But all right. Well, this evening we're going to be talking a little bit about just some of the issues that are going on this time of year. We still have a lot of our new beekeepers that we're still waiting on bees. The nukes that we've ordered from Central, we still have not got final word on those yet, and so it's going to end up being a weekend when Sean and I probably are going to be out of town or something like that. We're going to get that call, and I don't think you can tell them, hey, hold on to them for a day or two. I think you pretty much have to go right then and pick them up. So I'll schedule something for this weekend so that we can guarantee that that's when they'll be ready. So we're going to talk about some of those things. Still, for some of your first year beekeepers, we'll also get into if you did survive the winter and you're in a second year, and what's next. And then I'm just going to kind of open it up for some questions, as there's a lot of things going on in beehives right now, and so if you've got questions, we'll just kind of open it up at the end to deal with that as well. So, anything that I need to make known, Jamie or Sean, before I get started, that you can think of? Okay, if Jamie can't think of anything, yeah, I think they're back there in the fridge, and I'm not sure if they're any good anymore.
That's what I was going to say. Rebecca's going to grab hers, but I don't know if they're going to be good.
Yeah, you can. It's 14 days now since I picked them up, so you can put them down. It's not going to hurt anything, and if they're still viable, you can see. But I guess there's no way to know for sure. But yeah, we had, what was a total of about 19 or 20, something like that we had purchased. We'll talk about nematodes, and if you have any questions about those, then ask about those later on. I'll kind of explain a little bit what the whole nematode thing's all about. Just kind of heads up for what's coming up. Not a whole lot. We try not to schedule a whole lot of stuff in the spring and into early summer, because this is busy time for us to try to stay on top of our hives and other things that are going on. And so, but we do next month on the 18th have a field day scheduled. And what we had planned as the board for that field day, we're going to have to kind of tweak a little bit, because that's pretty much what we did last time. Last month, we did a lot of things on the field day. We did some marking queens, or drones. We marked some drones. We did a alcohol wash, mic test. We went through, did a hive inspection, and so we did a lot of stuff. I kind of did what was supposed to be done in April and June. We did it all in April, and so we'll find something to focus on when we get here in June. But it will be here, most likely up here in my bee yard, back up here on the hill, on the 18th. The June 2nd, that's next month. That'll be next month's meeting. So just make sure you have that on your calendar. All right, let's get into it. Some of this will be new stuff for some. It'll be old stuff for others. But let's just kind of talk about some of it. When we talk about, for those that are new, the newbies, some of the things that you're going to be getting into as you get your hives. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, how much can I get into my hives? How much should I open them up and look inside? And if you are brand new, I say get in there and look. Now, you don't want to be in there necessarily every single day. They don't typically like that too much. But I would say every 3 to 5 days, pop the top and begin to go through, because you are still, that's what this is about. This point, you're in that learning phase. And so you're learning to look at everything that's there, everything that is happening inside the hive. And so you're also learning how to act around your bees. And the first few times when you're out there, and if you're not used to it, even if you're completely suited up, and there are bees that are all around you and landing on your suit and on your mask and things like that, at first it can be a little bit intimidating, because it's just not something you're used to. And you get used to it, you get more and more comfortable with it. And any of you guys seen the show on TV called Bizarre? Any of you guys seen episodes of that? Kind of a little bit of a nutty guy, but he's good at what he does. And one of the things that he focuses on with his beekeepers, the people that help him do cutouts and things like that, is he talks about just your demeanor. And we know that bees have their pheromones that they put out and they communicate with, things like that. And you're going to hear me talk a lot these days about Jamie Ellis, the Bee Lab at University of Florida, because I have been listening. If you have not found or listened to Two Bees in a podcast, you need to find it. It is outstanding. Two Bees in a Podcast. It's a podcast. You can find it on just about any podcast, anywhere that they're available. And they do all kinds of information. Most of it is very science-based, experimental-based. The things that they have studied in their lab and in their bee yards, and they talk to people all over the world about bees of all kinds of different things. They have had on a guy not too long ago talking about human pheromones and how they affect bees. So they've done all kinds of studies, and it is a real thing that if you are nervous, you are putting out pheromones and things that the bees can pick up on, and they can detect that, and it does affect how they will respond to you. And so the more you get used to them, the more. I can remember that my first year, I thought, man, I'm not doing anything, but I was still just a little bit nervous. And they were constantly kind of coming at me, and I was suited up, I was fine. And I noticed, these days, when I'm up in my bee yard, I've pretty much just got a veil on, that's about it, and they completely leave me alone. It's a whole different world, and I'm wondering could that possibly be part of it, where now I'm not worried about them, so it keeps them from being too worried about me. And so how you're acting around them. You're not banging things around when you're first getting used. And it's interesting, when you see someone who's been keeping bees for a long time, when you see them go through a hive, it's almost like they're conducting an orchestra. They're very smooth, they're slow, the way that they move around the hive is just very purposeful. There's not any extra movement going on. They're not banging or kicking anything. They're not dropping frames. It happens every once in a while. Something like that happens. But those that are more experienced, there's more of a smooth technique to what they're doing. And again, it just comes with practice. It just comes with doing it and getting around it, being more familiar with it. But all those kinds of things are learning how you act around bees. You're learning what everything looks like. So when you first get into your hives, you've seen pictures online, you've seen all the YouTube videos. It's nothing like when you're holding a frame in your hands and you're looking at it yourself. And so you're learning what all of those different elements that are in that hive, what everything looks like. You're trying to find the queen, and if you're a new beekeeper, you're probably almost every single time you're in there, you're wanting to put eyes on the queen. Can I find her? And those that, even guys have been keeping bees for many years. A lot of times they like to put eyes on a queen, but they also realize I don't have to. I don't have to see my queen every time now because I can look for the signs to make sure that she's okay and that she's there. So I don't necessarily, but when you're new, find her. Do what you can to get your eyes on her. Take practice of finding a queen. If she's marked, that helps a lot. If she's not, then it just gives you a little bit more practice in finding that one bee out of the 50,000 that are in that box. The things that you've heard me say before to focus on when I'm teaching hive inspections thing are these three things: the brood, the food, and their mood. What's the mood of the bees? What does their food look like? The brood that we see in there, all forms of brood. So I'm looking to see, am I finding eggs in there? That tells me I've got a queen and she's laying. And she was at least there a day or two from the time that I'm looking in the hive. And so that's one of those things we're looking at. I don't necessarily need to see her because, oh, she's in here, she's doing good, man, she's laying well, everything looks healthy. I can put it back in, close the hive up, and I know that hive is doing well. So, as a beginner, you're going to really take the time to stop. Take the time to look closer and get used to seeing what does it really take to see the eggs down in the bottom of that cell, getting the sun in the cell just right to be able to see that. The older your eyes get, maybe putting on those specs to be able to see those things a little bit better. I'm getting there myself. Looking at the larvae, the different stages of larvae, brand new larvae. 3-day-old would mean the egg after 3 days on day 4 hatches into its first larva, a little big tiny thing curled up in the bottom of the cell, and all the way it'll be a larva for 12 days before they cap that cell. So you see all the different stages of larvae. And then after they're capped, what's my capped cells? What does that look like? Do I see worker brood? How much? Does it look good? Is the pattern good? Is she filling up frames? Am I seeing drone brood? And you see the difference, the muffin-shaped tops, the big rounded tops on that drone brood. Are you seeing any of that? And so all those things that you're looking at for brood. And then we talk about food, I'm looking at on the outside frames of my hive. Are they filling up the outside? Usually the outside they're filling up with nectar, with honey, and pollen as well. And so what do those outside frames look like? What does the food look like on the brood frame? So I have these brood frames that have all these baby bees that are on there, but is there a frame that looks like that? That's a pretty good looking frame right there, because you've got the brood right in the middle. There is pollen. There's pollen right here around the edges, and then honey up in the corners. Beekeeper will tell you that right there is the ideal frame in a beehive. If you go through your hive and that's what you see, things are good. And so But is there food right there? If it's right there on the frame, then they don't have to travel all the way out to the outside frames to bring something back to that frame. It makes it, it just shows it's the health, the strength of a colony is part of what that's telling us. And what is their mood like when you're done with your inspection? We talk about a lot of times what is their mood before we inspect them. Right when we pop the lid, what's their mood? Well, what about their mood when you're done? Because that will say somewhat about how you did as you were inspecting them and going through them. Did you have them open too long? They might not have liked that. Did you bang them around a little too much? Did you drop a frame? Did something happen that caused them to kind of get a little upset? Was it too windy? Or was it too cold or rainy? Or any of those kinds of things going on? And so I always like to kind of know and see how are they acting when I'm done. That's not so much about them. That's more about me as a beekeeper. It's telling me how I did while I was working with them that day. How do you do it? Go slow. Slow, slow, slow. Slow and easy. Take your time. You don't be in a hurry. That's what's going to end up getting most of new beekeepers. Something starts happening, and then you start rushing, and then something else happens, and just slow down. Take your time. Use as little smoke as possible. Don't ever, my recommendation, especially for new beekeepers, don't ever go into a hive inspection without smoke being ready. You need to have your smoke ready to go. You might not necessarily need it, but you always want to have smoke available just in case you need it. But use as little as possible. It's used to help to calm the bees. It's used to help to dissipate some pheromones, things like that. But if you don't have to use it and everybody's fine and they're happy, then it will keep everybody just a little bit more mild keel through the whole process. When we talk about inspecting your hives, when you start inspecting your hives, we recommend starting from the second frame from the outside. And there's a little less likely chance that the queen will be that far out. She could be. She sometimes is, but not too often. That's usually where more food is stored. And then that second frame, if you pull the first frame that's right up next to the edge of the box, there's such little space on that side that sometimes you can roll bees, or you can, just cause a little bit more. Sometimes they have put brace comb from that outside frame against the wall of the hive, holding it together. It's a little bit harder to get it out. And so I like to say start from frame 2. Loosen up the second frame, pull it straight up really slow, and then that's probably going to be a food frame still too. You can look for your queen. If she's not there, I'll take that frame and I'll usually set it down on the ground right next to the entrance of the hive. And now I've got some space and I'm able to have a little bit more room as I'm going through the hive. I don't have to worry about squishing bees and rolling bees when I'm pulling frames out, things like that. So start with that second frame, work your way in. This is my recommendation. This is not a have to, but it was something recommended to me, and I'm glad it was. Is if you're able to, you're comfortable with it, try to go through your hives without gloves, even if you're completely suited up. And the purpose for that is the bees will make you a better beekeeper. And most of the time when I get stung now, it's because I have done something too fast, or I haven't been careful enough. And so it's because I grabbed that frame and I didn't take the time to really look and see what was on the other side of that frame. And I squeezed a little girl and she didn't like it. But when I've got my big gloves on, I didn't know that. I was squeezing her and picking it up. I didn't realize she was even there. But as soon as I went without gloves, and the first time I went without gloves, I was terrified because I'd never done it before. And you're sticking your hands right in the middle of all those bees without any gloves on, and it was nerve-wracking. And for a while, it took me a while to get used to it. Till now, I don't even really think about it, because I know now if I have a hive that I notice is acting up a little bit, they're not real happy, and there's more of a chance that I could get stung, I'll put some gloves on, probably put a jacket on just to protect myself. I don't like getting stung, but it's something, again, the bees will teach you how to do a better job, and not wearing gloves will help. Log your visits. This is something that the first couple years I did not do very well. First year I started off pretty good because I was told that I needed to, and then the end of that year, into the next year, I didn't do very good logging the what I was doing as I was inspecting my hives, and now that I've been I'm going back to taking the time to really record what's happening in each hive. One, it helps me to learn, and two, I'm able to go back, and I am so thankful, especially the last year and a half, with all the trouble I've had with some of my hives. It's nice for me to be able to go back and see, okay, exactly where did this hive come from? It was a split off of what hive, or what were the problems that I saw last time that I was in here, or all of a sudden I don't see eggs. Did I see eggs last time? And it just gives me a little bit of because when you've got, especially if you have multiple hives, sometimes you can't remember all of them exactly what's going on. So log your visit. You can get a hive inspection sheet. I have some that I use that I've made up. I kind of seen other guys and I put one together that was my own, things I like to look for. And I can send copies of that out for anybody who wants that. Or there are all kinds of apps that are out there now. There's several. B Plus is one I probably use more than anything else. But there are several out there that you can go on. You can take pictures as you're going through your hive and log them into your inspections. All kinds of things that you can do with it. And so it's really, really neat, the different things that are out there. And there are more and more of those things that are coming out. I think, who was it? I just got it. Hive Tracker. Hive Tracker? They just released a new app for beekeepers. And it's just that same type of thing, but if you have some of the Hive Tracker equipment, you can connect to it too, and it'll log into it as well. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that's available. So for you're in this first year, once you have bees, or maybe you're caught a swarm and you're getting started, you're going now, just some of those things to keep in mind as you're getting started. Okay, so second year. If you started last year and you survived through the dearths and everything else that we had going on last year, and your bees made it through the winter, then you now, you have the ability to work and serve as a mentor, because you have accomplished something that is spectacular in the bee world, and that is you survived the winter. So now you're a little bit more comfortable, you're a little bit more familiar, you're not learning everything, you're still learning a lot, but you're not learning like you were last year. So in the spring, coming into summer, your inspections, you can back those off every 7 to 10 days or so. You don't want to go any more than 10 days. What can happen this time of year if you wait longer than 10 days to get in and inspect a hive? What happens? What's that?
Queen cells, a lot of them.
If you end up having if the day that you inspected and closed that hive up was the day that they decided to start building queen cells, and you wait longer than 10 days, then they're already going to be in the mindset of swarming, and it's going to be hard to stop them at that point, because they're going to have time to draw those out. They're getting close. Well, by more, if you go more than 10 days, they're going to be close to being sealed. enclosed, and so you're going to have some issues trying to control the swarming. So every 7 to 10 days, 10 at the max this time of year, going in, just checking, make sure everything's good, doesn't look like they're trying to swarm. There's no, we call queen events. A queen event is, if there's no eggs, you have a queen event. If there's a swarm cell, you have a queen event. If there is a, what do we call it? A supersedure cell, it's a queen event. There's something going on with the queen or with new queens, and those are always issues that you've got to pay attention to. And so, a supersedure. Supersedure cell, usually, it's not always, usually you can tell the difference. If they swarm, they are planning it, so they'll put swarm cells where they want them. So you'll usually see them at the bottom of frames. And you'll see a lot of guys who, when they're looking for swarm cells, they don't even pull frames, they just tip hives back, and they're looking at the bottom of the frames to see if they see any queen cells that have been drawn out. And a supersedure cell is if something has happened to that queen. So the queen has died, something, for some reason they've gone queenless, and they are going to have to raise queens from the eggs that are already in the hive. So they will start drawing a cell out of one of the worker cells that's in the middle of the frame and draw it out. Sometimes they will also draw swarm cells higher as well. So it's not 100%, but most of the time, if you see multiple ones in this middle of cells, in the middle of frames, then there was something that happened to the queen. If you see them being drawn along the bottom, that tells you that they're in the swarm process. So just a little bit of a difference just because of the location of where they put the cells on the frame. It just tells you a little bit more about what they're doing, what they're thinking. Second year, again, learning. Now you're learning to decipher the health of your colony. Coming out of winter, what is their health like? How strong are they? Are you noticing anything? Are you noticing any diseases? Are you noticing any problems with the brood? Are you noticing any problems with you see K-wing, which is a virus that the wings, it actually loosens one of the joints and the muscles of one of the sets of wings, and the way the wings sit on the back forms a K on their back. It's a virus that every once in a while shows up. You see our bees just kind of real shaky all over on the hive as you're going through and looking on frames. You have a bunch of bees on the ground. They're walking around on the ground in front of the hive. There's a lot of different things that you begin to look and you're like, I've never seen that before. What does that mean? And so usually it's something with hive health, some kind of a pest or some kind of a virus or bacteria that they are trying to deal with, and so it's always good to check on those things. You're analyzing your food supplies. We're getting a little bit late after winter for this, but as you're coming out of winter, we're really checking hive weight, see how much they have that's left in there. Although I say that, with all the rain that we've been having, we need to make sure that your bees have what they need, because they have not been able to get out and have good forage days, a whole lot of them for the last couple of weeks. Looking for those signs of swarming. We said looking for swarm cells. Looking to see if you see any of the queen cups. Check them and see if there's eggs in those queen cups. There's something cool. This is another on Two Bees in a podcast. There's I think it was in Italy. They were doing studies on the vibration, the sounds that the hive are making. Can you predict swarming by the sounds that a hive makes? And so they have had meters or microphones on hives for many, many years now, And they have actually been able to say, we can actually predict when a swarm is going to happen, even as much as 7 to 10 days before it happens, by just the frequency of what's happening in the hive. Kind of cool. A lot of cool science going on with bees. That's not something that you and I necessarily have the ability to stick on our hives to see if they're going to swarm. That'd be kind of nice, wouldn't it? If we knew 10 days from now they're getting a swarm, so I need to start. But they are talking about that kind of science is going to lead to innovations that can be things that backyard beekeepers are able to use in one of these days down the road. Who knows? Does the queen have enough room to lay? If she doesn't, that's going to be one of the reasons why they're going to start thinking about swarming. You learn how as spring comes in, if you're coming out of winter, you're going to see that those frames can fill up fast when she starts laying, and sometimes you could catch you off guard as you get in there. If you get into your hives late in the spring and you get in there and it is just packed full, and there are 5 or 6 or 7 frames that are front and back full of brood, and so within 2 or 3 weeks it is just going to explode, and you're going to have, it's a great thing, but you've got to be ready for it when it happens. And watching for swarm queen cells, we talked about that. So if they are growing fast, what do? Well, we do have to kind of manipulate our hives. In nature, bees swarm. That is the reproductive cycle of for honeybees, is the swarm. And so they will reproduce themselves by moving and duplicating from one hive to 2 hives. And so that's the natural way for them to do it. And here we are as beekeepers trying to keep them from doing that sometimes. And because if you're in honey production especially, because you're trying to keep all of the workforce that you possibly can in and not lose half of your hive right before the honey flow happens. And it's usually right close to before the honey flows take place when the swarms take place, because they even know that this is the time to leave, because the resources are about to be available for us to be able to use and grow, and starting a new hive shouldn't be a problem. Well, we do manipulate. Sometimes if you have multiple hives, you've got weak hives and strong hives, we'll take some frames and some bees from some of those strong hives and we'll move them in. So I've got a really weak hive, it's just not growing, just having some struggle. I might go over and pull 2 or 3 frames of brood from a strong hive and put them in this other hive. So then within the next couple of weeks, boom, that gave them a great boost, and they're going to have a lot more bees in that hive, and just kind of help build them up. It also, this hive, if it was getting really over, just boiling over with bees, well, I also slowed them down a little bit. And so you kind of are able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by doing that. Making splits. All different kinds of ways to make splits. You can make splits just by, I've got a box here, 10 frames full of bees, and I want to pull 5 frames out of here and put it into another box. You can buy a mated queen and introduce her into one of those, where you leave the queen in one and you put a new queen in another, and they're off to the races. It will be within a couple of days. And when they've accepted that queen, she'll be laying. You didn't miss out on anything really as far as time for that hive to continue to grow. You can do walk-away splits. Walk-away splits they're easy, they're simple, and allow the bees to do their own thing. And so you can do it one of 2 ways. Take frames out of one hive, making sure you have eggs on some of those frames. Leave the original queen in the original hive. Put those other frames in another hive. There are eggs there. I'm going to probably shake a few extra nurse bees into that hive as well. so that they have plenty of workers to be able to raise off of those eggs that are in there, raise a new queen. That's one way to do it. Or I can take those same frames and put it in the new hive and take the queen from the original hive and move her into that with them and allow this hive over here to be the one that raises the new queen. You can do it either way. You'll lose some foragers from this one probably, the ones that have been out foraging, because that one over there is home. So that's why a lot of times they'll shake a lot of nurse bees and things in. They haven't left the hive yet, so they don't know that they haven't gone out and done their orientation flights or anything yet. So wherever you put them is where their home's going to be until they start foraging, and you'll be all right. But a lot of those that you put in this one over here will probably end up drifting back over here because that's home, and that's okay. But just making a split that way. Another way let me stop there. Any questions about splits? Because we had some people talking about splits. Are there any questions specifically about doing splits? Yes.
So you don't really have to worry about splitting hives until your second year. So the first year?
Probably not.
Okay.
There is a chance. We're kind of getting a little bit later start with if you're going to be getting your nukes and things in this year. If you haven't even really gotten started, then there's a chance that you may be able to split into by the end of this year. My first year, I started with one nuke, and in July I did a walkaway split, and then they ended up being great and strong all through the winter and the next year. So it's possible. That was more me just seeing if I could do it than it was because I needed to. And so I was more playing around just to see, okay, in theory, I've heard them talk about this, let's see if it works. And it's amazing, it works. So there's a chance that you could, probably not gonna have to. If you continue to give them enough room as they grow through that first year, really you're feeding them all through that first year. You're doing everything you can to give them enough weight so that they can make it through the winter. That first year, goal number one is just let's survive the winter. And so I had several boxes that first year on top of it. Didn't need that much, but I was just, first year, I'm going to make sure they have everything that they possibly could need to be able to make it through the winter. And then I ended up being able to extract, a couple of those boxes because they didn't even touch it. So probably not, but if for some reason you get a queen that just goes crazy, then there's a chance you could grow enough to where you might want to before. You don't want to do it too late in the year, but it's possible. Any other questions or anything about splits? Yeah.
You're talking about making splits, pulling several frames from one hive, putting it in another, could you pull frames from two different hives and put them together?
You can. Mm-hmm. Absolutely can. And so if maybe you don't want to pull quite so much out of one and you've got multiple ones to work with, then take a few from this one, take a few from this one. If they're nurse bees don't really fight a whole lot. And so combining them into a hive usually isn't a big issue. It's usually the foragers that are the old crabby bees. They're the ones that have the biggest issue with each other. And so as you're combining those together, it usually works really well. Anything else about splits? Yeah.
I know I mentioned this to you earlier, but some folks may have the same thought. So when I watch guys on the internet and stuff like that, whenever they do a split, a lot of times they'll have some old brood comb or something like that to kind of fill in, where they've actually say they have too deep, and they'll take one, they'll kind of split that two ways, but then they always seem to go back with some old comb or something. And all I had was the foundation material in a deep frame, and I asked you that when you talked about that.
Yeah, when you're first starting off especially, you don't have drawn drawn comb is beekeeper's gold. And those first 2 or 3 years can be rough because you're trying to get as much drawn out as possible to be able to use it in various different ways that you need it. So when you're first starting off, all you've got is a foundation and you're doing splits. Early in the spring, especially if you're able to catch a swarm, you want to put foundation in with a new swarm, because swarms are made to draw comb. Because they knew when they left their home that the first thing we're going to have to do when we get to our new home is draw comb so the queen can start laying, so we can start storing food. So they're already in the mindset of as soon as we get into a new home, we're going to go and draw a bunch of comb. So swarms are the best ones to throw empty frames into so that you can get a bunch of drawn comb in. If you don't have drawn comb and that's all you've got is just some foundation that you're throwing in there with them, they may or may not draw it out real well, depending on time of year, depending on resources that are out there. If you're feeding them, if you're feeding 1-to-1 sugar water, they will have an easier time drawing it out. But it just kind of depends. You'll have one hive over here that just draws everything out fast. You have one over here that it'll just gradually have little patches of comb that are drawn out throughout, and so take those frames out, stick them in there, put those other ones in that one that's drawn it out real good. Who knows, just to get them to draw it out. So, but it does help when you're doing splits. If you're doing splits, you want to make sure you're moving brood in that split over. But if there is any other drawn comb, it just gives them that instant ability for the queen to have more room to lay and for them to start storing food. And so it just helps them out. It takes a lot of energy to make comb, to produce wax. And if they don't have to use that energy to produce wax, then they're going to be off to a lot better start and being able to do other things they need to do. So, good question. Anything else about splits? There's a lot of things that we can talk about when it comes to splits, but that's, I think, pretty much the basics of it. All right. We talked about checkerboarding as well. You got this box of bees that is it's just full. So there's your bottom box, 10 frames, and I got 6 frames in the middle. It's just brood all in the middle. You've got some honey frames on the outside that are full of honey, but it's full. Those frames are full of brood, full of honey. She doesn't have much any place to lay, and so this is when they begin to, when they get about 80% capacity of everything, that's when they start thinking swarm. And so if it's getting full, one thing you can do then is bring in another box, give them some more room on top of it. If you have drawn comb, it's ideal. If you don't, you put some frames in there. We're going to checkerboard. And what we're going to do in checkerboarding is we're going to take another box of 10 frames that are empty, whether it's foundation or it's empty comb, drawn comb, either way. And we're going to take this box and we're going to checkerboard it in. So every other frame. And so you're dropping it down. You notice you always have I didn't exactly do it in every single one, but you typically will have an empty frame over a full frame over an empty frame, all the way through the box. And so you want to make sure, I think I said something on there, no I didn't. You want to make sure that you've got decent weather when you do this, because you are breaking up the brood. And so you're taking some of that brood and putting it in that top box, so you're thinning out the bees that are covering that brood, and you want to make sure that they are able to keep the brood warm. So if we have nights that are dropping into the 40s, probably not a good idea to start checkerboarding hives, because it's going to thin out those nurse bees. They're not going to be able to keep them as warm. And so, but when things get nicer in spring, usually temperatures are a little bit warmer, we can start manipulating the hives like this gives the queen a little bit more room. All of a sudden, all the bees in the hive go, oh, look, we got plenty of room for the queen and for us to do what we need to do. And it will take that swarming mentality away, hopefully, from what they were doing. Well, you messed up. Well, you don't necessarily mess up. Sometimes they just do it. They swarmed on you. What do you do now? Well, you can start first by, this is a preventative, somebody pronounce that for me. Somebody know Russian? Scion? Skyon? Skion? Who knows? I think the car is called a Scion, isn't it, when they spell it that way? And this is what it is. That's just a board that has beeswax and propolis and bee scent smeared all over it. And so it's just hanging up there so that you see the hives in the background. If there is a swarm, we're hoping that the queen will find her way and land on that so that the rest of the swarm will land on it too. What I've seen some guys do is they'll take some old brood comb, a frame of brood comb, and they will nail that to. I've seen guys, they'll attach it to the bottom of a bucket lid, 5-gallon bucket lid, hang that bucket lid up somewhere, and then if you get a swarm on there, all you have to do is take that bucket and put the bucket lid into a bucket. You've got your swarm. You can take it in that bucket and go and dump them into a new hive. Or do it like this. You take your swarm, it's already collected. I would probably, instead of shaking them directly into the box, I would recommend shaking them out in front of the box. And the reason for that is it's a simulated swarm. Because right now, when they're on that, they have swarmed and they're on there. Or if you're out collecting a swarm tomorrow, and before you gather them up, take some time to look at the swarm. Watch what they're doing. Because if there's not much movement happening on that swarm, then one, you've got some time because they have not decided where they're going yet. If you notice a lot of waggle dances happening on the outside of that swarm, then you probably need to be a little bit quicker at getting them gathered up, because the more waggle dances you see on the outside of that swarm, the more likely they are, or they are beginning to decide we found a place to go, and we're telling you where we're going to go, and they're getting ready to take off and go to wherever they found a place for a new home. But
when you say time, what does that mean?
What's that?
When you say you have time, like, is that a matter of hours, days?
Yeah. It really is up to them. They might hang on a branch for a couple hours. They might hang on a branch for a couple days. So it just depends on really what the scouts are finding, and if they find a place that they see as suitable enough that they've convinced the rest of the hive is a good enough place to go. So it just kind of depends. But if there's not hardly any movement on it at all, then you know they're not going to be in a hurry to go anywhere anytime soon, and you've got some time to be able to get it handled. There's a lot of times, I've even seen some already this year where there'll be a swarm, we'll get a call, some guys will show up and it's already gone. And it just depends on how long it's been there, when somebody noticed it the first time. But when I was talking about shaking them out in front of the hive, they have in their mind, we need to swarm. When they gather in a cluster on a branch or on your scion or whatever they've collected on, that's only the first part of the swarm. They have not completely swarmed yet. They haven't found a new home yet. And so if you just take them and shake them into a box, in their mind, it's almost as though they're like, we haven't really swarmed yet. And so a lot of times what you'll see is they will take off again and they'll leave that box. But if you will take them and shake them, sometimes I'll put a towel or a sheet out in front of the hive. I've got a pillowcase I've got in my bee box, I'll put that out in front of the hive, and I will shake the swarm on that right in front of the box. The queen is she wants to go into a dark place. And so it's amazing how most of the time she will find her way into, if you haven't found her yet, she'll find her way into that box. And then you get to see the coolest thing in beekeeping. And you get to see the march of the bees. And these guys over here, they just experienced their first one.
Very cool.
And so I say it's one of the cool things. You have somebody standing around watching you. You're getting a swarm out of somebody's yard, or something like that. And especially if you find the queen and you get her in a clip, maybe, and get her in the hive, and then shake all the rest of the bees in front. You go, watch. It says, I'm a bee whisperer. March. And when they just start moving, and how did you do that? Well, I told them to. And so they went into the box.
Whole new space.
But it is very cool and you'll start to see right away several that'll be out on the landing board or the front of that hive, fanning their wings, telling everybody else, Mama's in here. Come on, this is our new home. But because you shook them out in front of the hive and they moved themselves in, there's a greater chance that they will stay there, because that's the second part of the swarm, is moving from outside the hive into a new home. And so it helps to kind of lock them in a little bit better. So, 'tis the season right now, isn't it? This is happening all over the place. And so put out to everybody you know, put out on Facebook, put out everywhere. Say, if you know someone that sees a swarm, call me. And if you're not able to go get it, let us know. You can put a swarm report on the website. You can call one of us and we will send it out. If you want to be a part of the swarm collection list, we are using the GroupMe app this year. And if you don't have that app, you can just download it to your phone, and then we can send you an invite to be a part of the swarm collection list. And what we're doing this year is just sending it out to everybody when there's a swarm that's been reported, and then kind of a first come, first serve. At the same time, being kind enough to not go get them all. Let some other people get some too. But if you want to be a part of that list, then let us know. Let Sean or me know, and we'll get you included on that. Always have some gear ready. So I was at Atwoods a couple weeks ago, and there's a guy seemed like it was, I'm not sure what kind of car it was, a little bitty thing. Opened up the trunk, and it had some nuke boxes in the back of his trunk. And I said, looks like you're ready for swarm season. He goes, you're right, I am. Always have a box that's traveling with you. And it's this time of year, how many people their eyes are up in the trees this time of year when you're driving down the road? Always scanning the trees, because you just never know when you're going to see a clump of bees hanging somewhere. But also always have your swarm gear ready. Have a box of some kind ready to put them in. Have some frames. If you don't have drawn comb yet, then don't worry about it. Just at least have some frames in there that they can crawl up on, and have some foundation, or even if you're going foundationless, have some starter strips or something ready to go. So they have something to get started on. That will work too. If all you got is a cardboard box, to get them home, and that happens a lot. If you see a swarm or someone, you pull up and you ask, I don't have stuff with me. You got a cardboard box, and you just shake them into the box and take them home and put them in one of your boxes. It'll work. Always good to have a veil, maybe some gloves. One of the great things about swarms is this is the most gentle you will ever experience bees, is during a swarm. And it does not mean that you won't get stung. I went and helped with the swarm a couple weeks ago, and I went. I did not have a veil, did not have a jacket or gloves or anything, and the only sting that I got was because if I was working up in this branch, I rubbed my arm on a branch where she happened to be, and she did not like that, so she got me. But other than that, it was really cool. This is the first time, I've done it with gloves before, but this is the first time I even got the courage up to use bare hands to just scoop them up off of the tree and shake them down into the box. And it's so cool. But like I say, with a swarm, you can do that more than you can with an established colony. Yeah.
A battery-powered VVAC.
Yes.
In Miami.
Yeah. A BVAC is great. You can build your own. There are all kinds of plans. Go online and find all kinds of plans to build your own, or you can buy them already made. I've bought a couple for when I do cutouts and things like that. But it is the easiest way to collect a swarm, because you pull your BVAC out, and you just suck them up off the fence, or especially if they're on a trunk or something like that. Those are hard to collect sometimes. If they're hanging out on a branch and you can just shake them off, that's great. But usually they're pretty easy. But if they're all around a trunk of a tree or on the hood of a car or something like that, if you don't get the queen, it's really hard to get them in that box. And so if you can get a BVAC and just vacuum them up and looking for the queen, hopefully you can find the queen as you're going along, but if not, hopefully you got her as you were getting them all sucked up, and take them home, dump them into a box, and collection's done. So yeah, I would highly recommend it if you have the ability to build one, or if you just want to purchase one. Very good idea. That's a good tool to have, even if it's a hand pruner, but sometimes those branches they're on, now if it's in somebody else's yard, you might want to ask them before you start cutting up their trees, but one of the easiest, in that paper box, if that's all you've got, cut the branch and just set the whole branch down into the box, close it up, take it home, and then you can deal with getting them into your hive when you get them back to the house. When they get up pretty high, then other tools sometimes are necessary. You can get a bucket on a pole where you can go up and just shake them into that bucket. And then a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll just bang the branch with that bucket on the end of that pole, let the bees fall into the bucket, then they'll land that bucket down and dump them out onto maybe a blanket or a sheet or something, and have a box sitting right there trying to get them to walk into that box. That makes it a little bit easier for swarm collection. Or it can be like Jamie and I did a couple years ago, climbing up ladders and into trees and trying to get everything done, and it was a little fun, wasn't it? It became a little more entertaining than we wanted it to be at first. But any questions about any of those things?
You mentioned hive trap earlier.
Swarm traps?
Swarm trap.
Mm-hmm. Swarm trap can be anything from just a regular box. Typically a deep tin frame box is the perfect size. And then we'll bait them. My swarm traps, I have some old comb in it. It's got good bee smell in it. I have coated some of the inside of it even with some beeswax. I've crumbled up some old bee comb in the bottom of it, and then I'll bait it with a little bit of lemongrass oil. You can buy Swarm Commander and some other types of swarm lures, but it's a duplicating queen pheromone, the mandibular pheromone of the queen, and but the lemongrass oil is very similar to that. And so I'll just put a little bit on a Q-tip, and I'll put a little bit right at the entrance, and some guys will even put them inside, let some of that scent come out. And so you put them out. It's kind of a science, and it's also kind of luck of where to put them. Put them in places where bees might travel more often, tree lines and things like that, where bees use a lot of landmark type things for navigation. So if it's a tree line, a lot of times there's a lot of bees travel tree lines because it's just a good navigation, help. And so if you can put a swarm trap near something like that where there's already a lot of travel, then they'll get a scent of that. And if they're scouts, and they get a scent of that, they'll go check it out. So they'll send a scout out, they'll check, that one scout will check it out, they like it, they'll go back to the swarm that's hanging in a tree, do a waggle dance to say, hey, I found a spot, and then a few more will come back with it. If they all like it, they'll all come back, do a waggle dance, and it's one of the cool thing about the honeybees, because some other scouts found another spot that she liked, and she came back, she's doing a waggle dance for her spot. And Tom Seeley's research and all this is, you begin to see this almost battle that takes place over, no, our place is better, no, our place is better, until the majority are doing it for the same location. And then that's when they make the decision to take off and go. And so if you can put up a box that is, and I would get Tom Seeley's Honeybee Democracy is the title of the book, and he will give you every detail of what the perfect swarm box is. How big of an entrance, should the entrance be at the bottom or the top? What's the scent? How high up should you put it? All kinds of things that he's done. So we've taken that's what we use to help develop and build our bee boxes. So,
There's
yeah.
a question from the live stream. Anybody have any tips for keeping red wasps out?
Tips for keeping red wasps out of the hive?
I'm assuming just, but how do I keep red wasps out?
I find their hive and kill them. That's what I do. There are a lot of times when we're opening up our hives, wasps and other things will smell that honey, and you'll have wasps landing. Usually the bees take care of that. It's not a big deal. We don't have any wasps in this area or hornets in this area that are a real danger to our bees. We're more afraid of them. I have no problem with bees flying around me and all that kind of thing now, but if there's a wasp, I hate it. And so if you see them in your hive on a frame, squish it with your hive tool. As far as keeping them away, you can put up wasp traps, because the lures for wasp traps usually are not something that will draw bees. And so, because the bait on those things is almost rancid usually. Bees don't want anything to do with that. But it does attract wasps, so those are something that you can try. Anybody else have any other ideas? Wasps, other than a can of spray that knocks them out of the air? Of course, you don't want to be doing that around your hives.
Watching under your leaves with all your buildings and stuff, and that's where they like to do.
Yeah. Go around all your sheds and all your buildings, your house, everything. Look up underneath the eaves. Look up underneath all those little, underneath it. I've found them in crawl spaces under houses and those kinds of things, and just you got to remove them that way, get them out of there. Yeah. Yes.
I use hot water and soap works the best for wasps. That's not really my question. I have another question. I had an older person tell me about when you see, and I've heard other people from different, I got a friend from another country, and they said they do this too. I don't know what y'all's experience is. This one time happened to me, it worked pretty good. They were actually in a vortex, headed upward like this, and they told me if you bang metal together, it would shut them down.
A swarm. We're talking about a swarm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the first time I did it was so cool because they were up in the air in a vortex. They were going up, and I happened to be by the dog pen, and I grabbed the dog bone with the bang. They fell out of the sky and hit the grass, It took me 3 days to find that queen in the ground. Once I got her in the once I got her into the hive body, everybody went in, and it was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
They just came right out of the sky.
I've never done it, but I have heard of a lot of guys that do that, especially a lot of old timers when they would have hives that would swarm. They would have hanging there next to in their bee yard. They would have a crowbar and maybe a hammer or something like that, and they will just bang it,
Worked well.
and it will draw them. A lot of times they'll have a hive set up, and they'll sit there and bang it right at that hive, and there's something about it. It's got to be something with that frequency of that vibration in the air that just kind of draws them right there to that spot. And so that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. I've seen guys on YouTube and things like that do it, but even then you're always kind of like, yeah, I wonder.
I had another hive this year that my mom, before I could get to my hive, my mom was at the house, and I told her, I said, grab a pan and start banging. And they were up in the vortex, and they didn't go 30 feet, and they stopped.
Huh.
That happened with her. I wasn't there that time. But
Very
we
cool.
did get them.
If you have a hive that's swarming, you don't know where they're going to end up.
Right.
There may be trees all right there in your property, and that queen decides she's going to fly a quarter of a mile away before she lands, and they cluster. So if you've got something to do that, to bang together metal, when you see them starting to swarm, then try it, and you might have a better chance of getting them to stop, and maybe stopping a tree closer if they don't come down to the ground. So cool stuff.
How common is it for queen's wings to be clipped when you get a nuke?
Usually they will tell you if they are, and usually it'll cost a little bit more if they've had to go in and clip wings. The question was, how common is it to have queens with clipped wings when you buy a nuke? And usually when you buy the nuke, they will tell you if the queen is either marked or clipped, and usually if they mark the queen or clip wings, it's going to cost you a little bit more because they're putting out so many nukes, they don't have time to stop and do that with everything. And so if you want it, they'll do it, but usually they'll charge you a little bit more for it. So if you get one that's clipped, unknown that it was clipped, then it was probably just one that got stuck in there and they didn't realize it. When we talk about clipping wings, so a lot of times that's done as a swarm prevention as well. She can still leave the hive, as these guys have dealt with, but she'll leave the hive. She can't fly, so you end up having a big ball of bees on the ground sometimes. A lot of times a queen with a clipped wing won't even try to fly, so it keeps her home. You're able to deal with swarming issues maybe a little bit different that way. But if she does try to leave the hive, sometimes they will, she'll hit the ground and all those bees will come down right on top of her. And so you'll see a pile of bees on the ground, and that's what these guys, they got a call about, got bees on the ground, come get them. And when they found the queen, noticed that her wing was clipped. Well, damaged. I don't know that it was actually intentionally clipped, but she had a damaged wing. And so it's a very, very common practice, especially amongst commercial beekeepers, clip wings. So, anything else?
Another
Yes.
question just came in. How do you deal with humidity buildup in a hot, sultry summer here?
Ventilation. I think I do recommend here in Northwest Arkansas screen bottoms on hives. Just gives ventilation. The bees are going to remove moisture, but they have to have a way to get it out. And we think about in a tree, you think, well, they don't have screen bottoms in a tree. But in a tree, they've also got 3, 4, 6, 8-inch thick walls that they don't have the humidity build up in a big tree like that, like they do in our thinner boxes. And so, I like the screen bottoms. Not everybody does, but I like the screen bottoms because it gives more ventilation. And the bees they actually station themselves in a hive in strategic locations, fanning their wings, moving air through that hive to control moisture. And so if they have a way of ventilating, have enough ventilation to get that moisture out, it shouldn't be a problem. If there is too much moisture in there, you might check and see, is there water getting into it somehow through a lid? Is there something else going on that shouldn't be an issue if you've got enough ventilation? Yes, sir.
You capture a swarm, there's a period of time between each, before she can start laying eggs. About what is that?
If you have drawn comb, then she'll start laying pretty much right away. It won't take her very long. And
3 or 4 days.
yeah, and as soon as she sees that she has to get back into laying shape, and so she'll put on a little bit more weight again and get back into laying shape. But as soon as she has a place to lay, and they draw comb so fast, a swarm does, when they land in a new home. A couple years ago, did a cutout, actually saw the swarm move into the eave of their house. And so I know exactly when they got there. And it was just a couple of days later when I went in and cut that out. And they already had 5 sheets of comb already. It wasn't real big, maybe about like that. But they already had 5 sheets of comb already being built. And they draw it fast. So as soon as she has a place to lay, then she can start at that point. Doesn't take very long. Anything else?
Ants. What about ants?
Yeah, good question.
Cinnamon?
Ants. Dealing with ants.
Oh, the little ones. It's a little bit, little.
Yeah.
They don't seem bothered by them, but there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
You open the lid.
Ants for the most part, I think, bother us more than they do the bees. There is a chance that they could, if they got overwhelmed, that could be a problem. But I see ants around my feeders. You know, when I'm feeding sugar water, they always find the sugar water. And then there may be some right around the top of the frames or something like that. I think the bees pretty much control that. The ants really aren't too concerned about it. They don't want to mess with the bees. So there are some things that you can do. You can put around I've seen guys set the feet of their hive stands in little bowls that have vegetable oil or something in it, so that when the ants come in, they get stuck and drown in that. However, when enough of them drown and that makes a bridge across there of dead ants, the rest of them will find their way eventually. So you got to change that out. There's, what's that stuff called, Sean? The Tanglefoot, maybe. It's a sticky stuff that you can kind of paint around the leg of your hive stand that ants can't cross. It's sticky stuff they can't cross. So there's some things that you can try like that.
I've heard that you sprinkle cinnamon around
That's what I do.
I've heard that before.
We've planted peppermint all around
Okay.
the whole bottom of it.
Okay.
We haven't had any ants since then.
Okay. So there's some ideas
Planted
for those. Planted peppermint.
Planted peppermint.
Yeah.
We'll take the leaves sometimes if we get one in the, like the upper part, we'll rub it on there.
Right.
Got my hands and
Yeah.
I'm in the yard.
And that's for those online that might not have heard that. Some things like peppermint, sprinkling cinnamon around the hives, outside the hives. Some things like that for ants.
Recommendation for feeders, I have a question.
Recommendation for feeders. Not Boardman feeders. Boardman feeders are the ones that slide inside the entrance. I don't recommend those. A lot of beekeepers have used them for a long time, and there may be guys here that use them. But especially in the spring, probably isn't as big a deal. But in the fall, when we're in robbing season, if bees from other colonies can smell that sugar water right there at the entrance, and you're just saying, come rob this hive. So I don't recommend those. Any kind of top feeder that is enclosed that only that hive has access to is the best kind of feeder. So they make round feeders. I have a oblong one that it's pretty good size, holds almost a gallon. That you set in on your bottom board, or your inner cover. Your inner cover has the hole in the top of it. You set that in on your inner cover, and there's a hole that goes up through that feeder. The bees are able to come up through that hole and access the sugar water. You just set an empty box on top of it, put your lid on it. Nobody has access to it except the bees that are coming up from underneath in that hive. If you have Apame hives, they come with built-in feeders, and they work great. They're really, really good. So if you've gone the Apame hive direction, then your feeders already take care of it.
I've had good luck with Ziploc bags.
You were saying that. So you can take a Ziploc bag, put your sugar water in a Ziploc bag, and you put it in there to where the bubble, where the air is, the very top of that bag, poke a hole in it, and then the bees are able to come up and access it. Is that how you do it? They're able to come.
Just take a knife and just make 2 little slits in that bubble.
Yeah.
And they clean it out every bit of it.
Okay. So.
But you have to have a riser in there
Right.
about 1.5 to 2 inches.
Yeah.
Set
Yeah.
that on top of the inner cover?
You just set it right on top of you set it on the
Right on
frames.
top of the frame.
Right on top of the frames. So you lay it right on top of your frames, and you're going to have a spacer, a riser, so that you're able to put your inner cover on top of that and your lid. But yeah, you just lay it right on top of the frames.
I use a 2-gallon bag and put a gallon of sugar water in it.
Okay.
And then there's just about 2 or 3 inches around
Mm-hmm.
that don't cover bees to come up on all sides of it.
Right. Yeah, very good. I like it. I need to try that.
The only downside about it is, you put it in there and the bees don't get all of it, and then you gotta take that super
Right.
off.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep from spilling that sugar water.
Yeah, if you got to grab that bag off of there, if it's full.
Yeah.
But if it's in there for very long, it's probably not going to be full for very long. But even then, you probably will somewhat grab the top of it and be able to lift it off of there. And even if you spill a little bit of sugar water, they don't mind. They clean it off for themselves, and they probably say thank you for the sugar bath. But, very good. Yes.
The 50/50.
Okay. Any other questions? It is that time of year for just all kinds of questions. So if there are anything that you have, never hesitate to reach out to any of us, any of the officers, club, your mentor. If you've been connected with a mentor. If you have not, make sure that you go through the website to try to be connected with a mentor. If you've done that and you're still not connected with a mentor, let us know so we can try to make sure that we get somebody with you. But if there's not any other questions.
When is the bee convention scheduled?
The bee
The
convention,
one in like, Mountain View, is it September?
it was this last year, and I'm not sure it'll be the same place. We'll have to wait and see.
I was there, and I think they said they booked it when they were there for the following year.
So they
One
booked.
of those state parks, you can only do it exactly 1 year in advance.
Oh, okay.
And I think that they booked it.
They did book it for the same location then for this next year. So it'll be sometime in September again, probably.
Okay. Very, very informative.
Yeah, good.
Very good.
Very good.
Well, getting ready for that, for those that have never seen the Bee March, Danny Brewer has a very good video on YouTube that all, we're doing 50/50, and put it up on.
Yeah, might be able to do that. Yeah, okay, 50/50.
All right, take out your tickets. The last 3 digits are 615,
615.
and it was probably ripped, so.
615.
615?
You got it? All right. Congrats. Good job.
No, I did not.
That's the one where he's driving down the road.
Just takes one little minute. Ask them all questions.
I know they are.
Yeah, I'm serious, man.
With mine, we can go down to this one. But some people,
Big hole up.
yeah, well, it's